So one of the first questions comes from Laura from DTA. Was how do you envision the future in Colorado in light of the drastic budget cuts, particularly around education?
Well, if we have to continue to cut education, frankly, I don't think any of us are very optimistic about the future for the state. If we see that we already have too many children who aren't finishing high school, we have an achievement gap that isn't narrowing appreciably, and we have a growing percentage of our student population who are English language learners, who are minority ethnicities, and so we know we face bigger challenges and yet we have fewer dollars to serve them. I think that what we will see though in this state, whether it's next year or the year after, is a commitment by Colorado citizens to invest in our state's future. And investing in our state's future means investing in education.
As an association, we believe that, and I know the administration also believes, that this trend of not having enough resources and revenue to support our education, both the whole P20 system, is not sustainable. And so what do you think that it will take to get more money into our system and be able to reverse this trend of cuts that we've been seeing?
Well, you know, one of the things that strikes, I think, all of us is that people, the broader public out there will say, we think the K-12 system isn't working and we don't have faith in it. And yet, when it comes to the teachers they know who teach their kids, they tend to have a great deal of confidence in that individual or maybe in that school. But for some reason they have this notion that K through 12 generally is not effective. And it's partly, I think, because of the way media report about education. We do hear about the failures. And there are some, there's no question. There are too many students who don't complete. I think that when people see impacts in their own districts and their own schools, as they see class sizes increase, as they're hit up more to help support basic supplies for the students, I think they're going to say, we need to support our school. But what we need to do is get people to think beyond supporting their child's classroom or their child's school and supporting the public education system generally. So we not only need more money, we need to think about where that money comes from. Right now, one of the challenges has been how we fund schools with local property taxes, with local mill levies. And what's happened is we've ended up with a system where for certain districts they're able to fully fund their schools, others are not, and so state general fund money has to go back in. And what's happened is more and more state general fund money has had to go in to support public schools, which means it's taken money away from other things, like higher education. So we need to, I think, revisit entirely the way we fund public education in this state. And we need to think about whether we are willing to take money from one district to another to support schools. I think that is really the only way to end up with equity in the state when we don't have communities that are equal in terms of resources. Yet every community has needs. That's a tough sell. It's very, very tough. But I think we need to begin to talk about that.
How would you encourage that conversation to start happening on that? With for the past few days, we've been really working on what we're calling our Take the Lead project, which is about encouraging and mobilizing our members and these folks in the room to be spokespeople for advocating for increased funding in our state and in education. What do you see as some of those necessary components for having that dialogue and encouraging that going forward?
It's what you guys do best. You teach, you educate, you inform. You let people know what the real facts are. And I think we do have to look at what is the level of funding per student in this state compared to other states. You all know that we are dramatically underfunded compared to other states. I don't think the public really gets it. We say it over and over, but I think we need to use actual numbers and say, here's how much we spend to educate a child in Colorado compared to what they spend in virtually every other state. I think we also need to talk about our economy. You know, that what is going to drive our economy in the future? And it is, you know, we will not be successful if we don't have a globally competitive, meaning well-educated workforce. And we can't just focus on white middle-class kids either, because frankly, that's a declining share of or percentage of the total number of kids in school. We have to say that educating those English language learners, educating those Hispanic and other minority students is important not just to them, but to us. I think that's critically important. But I think as people see, again, challenges in their own districts, in their own schools, they will, I think, come around to understanding that it simply is an investment they have to be prepared to make.
Thank you. One other thing, then we're going to turn it over to Lynn and Julie to ask some questions there. So if you're thinking of questions, start thinking, because we're going to ask one more question, then we'll go into the audience for other questions. One of the things that we have in this association is not just an association of teachers, but also educational support professionals. We have bus drivers and food service workers and janitorial staff, teachers' aides. We have the full gamut of individuals that make up the whole body of a school. A school is very much more of a classroom. And one of the challenges that we see happen in districts in tough budgetary times is that these are often the positions that are cut first. How do we work, how do we really show value for these positions that are critical to the functioning of schools when we're continually faced with having them either lost or outsourced in those parts? Because we as an association see them of really big value. But it's hard sometimes, I think, for that to translate when we're in tight budgetary times.
It is hard to translate, and there's not an easy answer to that one. Frankly, we do know that support personnel make a huge difference in schools, and some kids just aren't going to connect with their classroom teacher, but they might, frankly, with that custodian, that cafeteria worker who says hi, who recognizes when they're down, and it just says something to encourage them. I had people like that in my life in schools, and I know they are important, but I think to the average taxpayer, to the parent, they think the number one person in that school, the most important person in that school is the classroom teacher. It's hard to argue with that. We just need more money available, or we are going to face increasing reductions in force to those other folks. And we are going to continue to hear calls for more privatization, as if that is the magic bullet, and that's going to allow us to save a lot of money. Frankly, I don't see that. But I think we're going to continue to hear that as long as resources are tight.
Yep. Thank you. Well, we're going to go to some questions in the audience.
You mentioned a little bit ago that you recognize that teachers and educators are digging into the pockets more to support what's going on in the classroom. That class sizes are increasing. That workload is increasing. I'm concerned that all of those are going to have a very chilling effect on attracting and recruiting the highest quality candidates in the teacher preparation program. So I'd like you to put on your higher ed hat and tell us how we can continue to attract the highest quality candidates into our colleges and universities teacher preparation programs.
You know, as I said, my wife teaches at Colorado College, where parents spend way too much money to send their kids to school. And it's funny when she gets really good students. She's an English professor, and when she has these students who say, you know, I came in, I wanted to go to law school, but I think now I really want to be a teacher. And she says, that's great. You know, there's no more honorable profession, no more important profession. But it's funny how often parents call her and say, oh my God, we're spending $100,000 on Susie, and she's brilliant, and she wants to throw her life away as a teacher. We want her to go to law school. Now, how do we, you know, and that's true, right? We know that's true because we think those really high performers ought not put themselves in a position where their hours are going to be long, where they're going to be underappreciated, overworked and underpaid, and we don't see a lot of change on the horizon. That is a challenge. Now, I think we are seeing, frankly, because of the economy, more and more students who are high-performing students saying, you know, teaching I might take a look at that. Now, what we've got to do is convince those high-performing students to be fully committed teachers and not come do it for a year or two to make their law school application look better. And we really, really want high performers, the best students, to go into teaching. But we have to, frankly, professionalize the profession. I mean, we may think of it as a profession, but we need to pay them as professionals. And there's more than just pay. We need to respect them as professionals. And I think that's really important as well.
All we ever hear is negative information that's coming out of the media. How can CEA and our state government together to get out all of the positive things that are happening in our schools and in our school district, and the positive note that's going on with all of our students. Because I think that would go a long way towards improving public perception and getting the willingness to fight discrimination.
Absolutely. Getting that word out is important. But think about the positive stories you see in the press about education. Because you do see positive stories, but they're generally about, well, let's say, charter schools that are doing something that's different and serving, a kind of narrow slice of the student population. We need to figure out how to get positive stories out about your schools, the ones you teach in where you face some of the biggest challenges. And there are positive stories all the time. You see those students who come in from broken homes or who are homeless completely and yet manage to accomplish amazing things. And frankly, you need to talk about them more. We need to send letters to the editor. We need to call those features writers and say, I got a great story here for you. You should come write about it. Now, you won't always succeed, but I think if people begin to hear and they want to print interesting stories, and right now the interesting stories are the negative ones. Let's give them positive ones to talk about, because we know there's plenty of them. But it is challenging. I mean, it is easier to sell newspapers with bad news than good news. That's just the way the news industry is. But I think if you also serve as spokespersons for your school and your profession, that will help.